Right, hello everyone, and welcome to another Wednesday webinar. Today we're talking about extracurricular activities, why they're important, what you can and should be doing, and what you should be thinking about. And to help me with that, I've got two fantastic experts on this. And when I thought about who or which schools would be really good to speak to about extracurriculars, the first two schools I thought of were Harrow and Uppingham, two schools that we work quite closely with. So without further ado, I'd like to introduce you to if you like, the US college counselors at those schools. First of all, we have Kasia Fletcher, who is the Master in Charge of Overseas Universities. I think I've got that right. Kasia, would you like to introduce yourself and talk about Harrow a bit?
Yes, so hello everyone. Welcome to this webinar. I have been teaching at Harrow for 13 years, so quite a long time. I'm head of Russian here, but as it often happens at boarding schools, you are never doing just one job. You're doing usually, 50 different jobs, if not more. And one of my other jobs are US universities. I'm, as Jason said, Master in Charge of US Universities. And I also have a part-time US Universities advisor working with me. And assisting me simply because of the number of applicants that we have every year, and that's also a rapidly increasing number, which is quite scary sometimes. Normally, at the moment, we've got about 40 boys applying to US universities. Most of them take their offers. The vast majority will be applying both in the US and in the UK, but using their UK universities as a backup option. So still usually dreaming of going to a US universities rather than staying here. Like I said, the numbers are growing. In the current lower 6 year, we've got more than 50 boys, and the year below there are at the moment 74. Which is close to half of our year. And like I said, it's becoming a bit overwhelming sometimes, but boys are doing really well. The most recent application cycle has been very successful for the school. So it's good to see that whatever we are doing, it seems to be working.
Great, thank you very much, Kasia. And we also have Jim Reddy with us. Jim Reddy is, I'm going to just complete mess up your job title here, but Head of Overseas Universities at Uppingham School.
Yeah. Thanks, Jason. I've rebadged it from overseas because I thought that was a bit of an imperialist phrase to global or non-UK universities. So thank you. I've been working at Uppingham for 11 years, doing the non-UK or global universities gig for about 6 years. I was a housemaster for 9 years of a boys' boarding house of 50 boys, teach history. We're 13 to 18, co-educational, all boarding, pretty much 98% boarding. And I think, so 25% of our students at Uppingham are I think we classify them as non-UK students, so international students. We probably have fewer than Harrow, 20 approx every year apply to the US. That's fluctuated a little bit, quite a sharp growth over the last few years, but I think we're leveling off at about 20 to 25 per year applying to the US. And a little bit like Harrow, I think, sorry, Kasia, I don't know what you said about whether yours are applying to the US only or whether they're also applying to the UK, but many of ours are also putting in a UK application concurrently with their US application. Yeah.
Great.
For us, typically, if we have, say, 40 boys, there will be only maybe 5 who are applying exclusively to US universities. The remaining 35 will be applying also to UK universities and occasionally to Canada. There are sometimes years when we have lots of boys applying, sometimes very few or none.
Yeah. Okay, so to help us with this talk and this presentation today, I've got a PowerPoint presentation that I'm going to share, and I'm going to make sure that this hopefully works and hopefully everyone can see that. Before we get started, I just want to say to everyone who's listening, if you've got questions, please pop them in the Q&A box. I think I saw someone raise their hand. They've since lowered their hand. I'm not sure if that was accidental or not, but please, if you've got any questions at any point, pop them in the Q&A box and we will answer them either straight away if it's appropriate or at the very end. But we're going to try and keep it quite organic and just see what happens as we go. But we've got a few talking points here. So first of all, I wanted to talk a little bit about what extracurriculars actually are. Now, we're going to then go on and talk about what kinds of qualities that those extracurricular activities demonstrate and what the universities are looking for. We'll talk a little bit about when students should start them and how long they should do them for. And also talk a little bit about what level is actually good enough. How good or how much should students be doing these extracurricular activities? So what are extracurricular activities? I am just going to put up lots of different things, some of which I think are obvious and some of which I think might need a little bit more explanation. And then I'm sure that you, Kasia, and you, Jim, will be able to tell me about the things that I've missed. So first of all, the obvious one is sport. It is something you do outside of school, or maybe it's part of school, but it's certainly outside of lessons. Music, drama, clubs and societies, either within school or external to school. Other school activities, so things that might not be part of lessons, but things that are offered by the school. Additional academic things outside of school, like doing Coursera courses in the summer. Organised awards like D of E, for instance. Religious, cultural activities. Caring for others, even if it's just caring for a family member, you would certainly count as an extracurricular. Jobs, work experience, internships, and any other hobbies and interests. And I think one of the things that I wanted to say is that a lot of people forget that some things that they're just interested in, let's say they're interested in cooking, that is an extracurricular activity that could be worth mentioning in an application. Kasia, is there anything there that I might have missed out, or anything that you think counts as an extracurricular that people might forget about?
I think, those things that I can think of that we offer, they can go in one of those broader categories that are on the screen. So I think, looking at additional, activities, for example, at Harrow, CCF is a really big thing. So I don't know, I suppose it can go under school activities, but it's quite a major thing, I would say.
Exactly. And I think sometimes people think, well, we shouldn't mention this because everyone does this at school, but actually it could still be very unique when you're thinking about applicants to the US, because very few people will actually have CCF on their application form. Jim, anything there or anything that you do at Uppingham that either does or doesn't fall into these categories?
No, I think that's a great list. There's a couple of things that spring to mind, Jason. Firstly, I think that bullet point, caring for others, we have a big program called Make a Difference, which is sort of community service, but it's getting the pupils to do something charitable and community-based, which is going to leave a longer legacy after they've left the school, whereby they might be doing something in the broader community. So I think you've covered it under caring for others, but I think that's something that's really big. The other thing I think is if you're applying for a sort of entrepreneurial / business course, I don't know, somewhere like Babson or wherever, or NYU Business School, and I think, again, you touch on it on jobs and work experience. I think it's going to be important to demonstrate you have an entrepreneurial bent about you, that you have a sort of real interest in business, for example. So anything, and I suppose that also goes for additional academics outside of school. So if you're applying for a course that's more that's not liberal arts, I suppose what I'm saying is it's a bit more narrow than a demonstration that you've really drilled down into what that might be about. Business is just something that springs to mind.
I think that makes sense, and I think one thing we'll go on to talk about is this idea of the theme in an application.
And I also think that perhaps as a separate point, I would add all national and international subject competitions and essay prizes and Olympiads as well. Maybe that deserves a separate bullet point.
I think you're right. The Olympiads was mentioned by one of my
more kind of, you know, academic extension, but when you actually compete not just with students in your school, but on a whether it's, you know, national or global level.
And just to back that up, and I'd say this, whether it's an Oxbridge candidate or a Durham applicant or a US applicant, your bullet point there, Jason, additional academics outside of school, absolutely. But as Kasia says, the more that can be empirical evidence of what you've done. So rather than I've read X and Y book, or I've been on YouTube and listened to X and Y lecture from Yale, absolutely, as you said, Kasia, that I've entered this competition and I have tangible proof that I have been ranked, you know, nationally in this competition is so powerful, and gives us as the council recommender something to write that's so much more tangible than. So,
for example, you know, science Olympiads, if you come as top 3% in the country, that is very tangible and very, you know, it doesn't really require a lot of explanation for US universities, you know, admissions directors. It is clear that you are the absolute elite in that subject. When we are talking about this, I might perhaps add that in on the system, our internal Harrow system, in the after Harrow section, where we talk about universities, we actually have a separate Excel spreadsheet, which is a live document, and we try to list there pretty much all the major Olympiads and essay prizes and other competitions, and they are divided by subject. And there is, of course, a clickable link, but also, you know, it shows you when they open, when they close, and there is a person who is in charge of collecting that information and making sure that it's, you know, it's accurate and boys can very easily access it and not miss anything. And we repeatedly remind them about this document. Actually, I know as a tutor, I often check what is still open, particularly before any longer school holiday, because of course, when they are in a boarding school, they don't have a lot of free time. I would say probably closer to they have no free time. So, you know, doing a big research and writing a paper about this might be problematic during term time. So with my tutees, certainly when we have a half term or Easter break, I would often just quickly look and open it and show to the boys and say, look, this is, and try to, you know, with younger boys, it's a bit of a, you know, carrot exercise where you can tell them, okay, it's an international competition, is probably quite difficult to win, but if you prepare a good entry and you share it with me, it doesn't matter whether you win or whether you get a commendation, I will still give you an internal, you know, prize for doing it. So their effort is somehow recognized. And I think from the point of, you know, for universities, for example, the fact that they can use different sources, that they can reference sources properly, all those skills that are absolutely crucial, whatever you study. And I think, you know,
Yeah.
in the US.
I think on that note, let's go on and look at what those qualities are that colleges are really care about. And one thing I do want to say is that I think one other glaring category that I should have put in here that I've missed is volunteering in general. I mean, we talk about caring for others there, but general volunteering and community service. We did have one question, which was, what does CCF mean? It means, I think I'm right in saying it's
Combined Cadet Force.
Yeah, it's like the kind of military-based club that students do in some schools.
Yeah, well, for us, it's a massive thing, and all the boys at I think for a year they all have to do it, and they can choose whether they want to be in the Navy or whether they want to be, you know, there are different parts, and it is run like a proper army with, you know, that I know that they have training with professional army and so on. So, and they gain titles and they move up the ranks and so on. So it's a major commitment.
Okay, great. Well, let's go on and talk about the sorts of activities that that they're looking for in universities and what these activities demonstrate. First of all, a really obvious one, and the one that gets bandied around a lot, is leadership. I always like to tell students that it's not so much about being a leader, it's about taking, and in fact, I'm going to go on to the next point, taking responsibility for things and organizing things, showing that you've got those skills of being able to gather people and organization together and make things happen. Jim, do you have any good examples? I mean, is this a major one that you try and look for in your applications at Uppingham?
Yeah, I think it is. So I'm just, before we started, I was looking at some successful applicants and the council recommendations I'd written for them. Yeah, so I think with this, it doesn't really matter whether you've been a head boy, head girl in a boarding school, house captain, house, you know, school prefect, school, whatever it is. I think, you know, in my experience, the title of the role that you have within your school or the level of role is not actually that important. I think what's really important is that there's something you're passionate about as a young person, and that you've made a change, and you brought other people along with you, and you can demonstrate that's made a difference. And it sort of comes back to the whole thing that US universities talk about is, you know, what sort of footprint or legacy will this student make at this university in 4 or 5 years time. So yes, leadership responsibility, absolutely. And it could be in sport, it could be in music, it could be in drama, but it could be in the smallest thing. It could be, I don't know, organizing a half marathon for 20 of your peers in your year group for charity, and actually getting off your backside and raising the money and helping everyone with their training, and bringing them along and encouraging them and making it all happen. So I don't think you need to be a head boy or a head girl. I think, you know, all is not lost if you haven't made those positions. I think, you know, have a thing you're passionate about, make it happen, and demonstrate that you've brought other people along with you. Does that help? I think that's.
And I would say at Harrow, because we have 12 boarding houses, there are lots of different competitions between houses, and these are run by the boys. So, for example, you know, Glees and 12s, the big singing event, where you know, it's entirely boys run. They have to decide who will be in 12s, who will be in Glees from the house. They have to choose the right songs. They have to organize, you know, practice after prep for several weeks to prepare. And there is always one boy, the oldest boy typically, who is in charge. And that it's a perfect opportunity to show real leadership skills and, you know, taking responsibility, because at the end, you know, you perform in front of the whole school and guests and an external adjudicator. So of course, you know, if you don't get it right, I mean, imagine coming and standing in front of over 1,000 people and making a fool of yourself and the house. That would be something, you know, unforgivable almost. So I think also there is a system in each boarding house where when new boys move to the next year, they become shepherds for the boys who start, and then they kind of form, there is like a line, if you draw through 5 years of boys who was whose shepherd, and they form like a flock. We call it a flock. So a boy who is even, you know, very young, 14, in his second year at school, will already have responsibility for younger boys and making sure that they settle in really well at school and that they are happy, and they will be kind of, you know, alerted if something happens, and perhaps, you know, boys often find out quicker than teachers do. And I would also say, you know, society is becoming a secretary of a major society at school, where you have to organize external speakers, you have to, you know, communicate with them, invite them, organize a dinner with them after the lecture when they come, often, you know, getting the master in charge involved to organize accommodation for them if they stay overnight and so on. So these are, I think, really good opportunities. Also directing plays at Harrow. Every boarding house needs to perform a play at our theatre. And this again means that every boy in the house needs to be involved in some capacity, even if you are not acting. There is, of course, you know, the light and the sound, and being, you know, front of the house and serving drinks, and music, if there is music in the play, it's a major thing. And, you know, boys, of course, do the rehearsals for weeks and weeks. You know, getting properly involved in that, it's also a really good scope for showing your leadership and responsibility.
That's great. And I mean, you've really touched on that there, Kasia, about the idea that there's lots of different activities and lots of opportunities for students to get involved in different leadership positions. And one thing that we always try and reiterate to students is that it's not about just being a captain or being a head boy or head girl. It's about thinking about the things that you do and looking for opportunities within it. Because there's always opportunities if you look far enough. Now, one question was, what is a head girl or head boy? I appreciate some schools don't have that, but it's a position normally awarded to 1 or 2 students in the year who are kind of responsible for all the other students, and their responsibility differs in different schools. But if your school doesn't have it, then obviously you can't be a head girl or head boy. Okay, another quality that universities always think about is community service. Now, we touched on this in the last slide, but community service is about things like volunteering and giving back to the community. This is something that's really important to American universities. They want to make sure that they are good neighbours, and they want to ensure that they are contributing to the community within where they are. So this is something that I think at some level is always offered in most schools, but then it's quite important for students to go and look for other opportunities. So Jim, what do students at Uppingham tend to do?
I was thinking about this earlier on when I was walking past the primary school. So I live in a village which is 8 miles away from my school, and the primary school is not actually that wealthy, and it doesn't have any musical instruments. And there was a boy from Uppingham School called Ollie, who used to go on a Monday afternoon to the primary school as part of his community service program and teach the young people music. But he was very frustrated by the absence of musical instruments for the young primary school students to play on. So he arranged for, he made it his business to fundraise and beg, steal and borrow for as many musical instruments as he could to give to that primary school. So the primary school in my village, which is where Ollie used to do his volunteering, now has trumpets, and it has loads more recorders, and it has keyboards and so on. So for me, that was brilliant, and I wrote all about that in his reference, and he got some really good offers. He was also bright. For me, that was a really good demonstration of, you know, Uppingham School provided a community service program, which was quite easy for him to take part in. Every Monday, he got on a minibus, he went to the primary school, he taught music, but he then thought a little bit more about it when he got back to his privileged Uppingham School. And he thought, hang on a minute, how can I make a difference to this school, this primary school that doesn't have money for musical instruments? So he got off his backside basically and made a difference. So for me, that was a great one. And then another one that springs to mind is a girl, upper sixth now, so year 13 at Uppingham, who's a great basketball player. She's on a full scholarship to Uppingham. She's a GB basketball player. But I challenged her as part of her US application. I said, look, what are you doing outside Uppingham, outside this wonderful place? You know, you play for Leicestershire and GB at basketball and so on. And so she now goes out to 3 different schools and coaches, different state schools locally, to coach basketball in her spare time. And I think it's just that awareness of the fact that you're in a very privileged environment, if you're at a private school, or even if you're not at a private school, an awareness of your own skills and talents and how you can share those with a broader community. To make a difference.
And Kasia, obviously, often the boys at Harrow don't feel like they have a lot of spare time. So how do they find time?
So there is, of course, you know, a very extensive program of community service. We have typically 200 boys participating. I have some data for the most recent annual report. So there is one organization called Shaftesbury Enterprises, like an umbrella kind of organization for lots of different community service programs. But 200 boys typically volunteer on a regular basis. So there is a specific time during, you know, the week when they do that. From that report, I found out earlier today that in the last 12 months, boys spent in total about 8,000 hours volunteering. And also, in addition to that, teachers spend 1,000 hours of their time coordinating, coaching and mentoring the boys who are involved. So it's a massive operation. There are lots of different projects. Some are projects that we support, like, you know, for many, many years. They are ongoing, working with local schools. And again, I think to start with, it was boys were almost, you know, kind of given something to do, and then they just had to go on a certain day and do it. But lots of boys wanted to run their own bespoke, you know, programs, and they started offering fencing and tennis coaching and music lessons and God knows what. So lots of them now, the school kind of provides them with a platform, but then they really think in a more kind of creative way about how they can use that platform, what they can do to make a real, you know, change to local community. And what I wanted to say is that when COVID came, of course, you know, suddenly all these opportunities pretty much disappeared because we had to sit at home in front of computer screens for most of the day. And boys, my US applicants had, you know, an absolute panic attack, like, you know, what will we be talking about in our applications if there is COVID and we can't do, you know, all the stuff that previous years were able to do. And then suddenly, you know, they thought, well, I said to them, let's have a look if there are any volunteering opportunities online. And we were absolutely amazed by what is available, how much volunteering you can do without leaving your bedroom. So, for example, they identified an organization, I think it's called Be My Eyes, for blind people who need assistance. And I know that some boys were recording textbooks for blind people who are working on their degree courses and they don't have textbooks in Braille. So they, in order to complete that course, they rely on somebody recording a textbook for them. And, you know, you can do it for half an hour a day, or you can do it for, 2 hours a week. It depends how much time you can spare, but this is definitely something. And we have some boys who have, medical conditions, and they have serious issues with their vision. And this was something really close to their heart, because they probably understand better than most of us what it means and what kind of an obstacle it can be if you cannot really see very well. So there are, and I would definitely encourage students, particularly at schools where perhaps the schools that don't have those volunteering programs developed, that you can find stuff even online, things that you can do from home. And if this is the best you can offer, then it's all about your commitment and the change, the impact that you make, on somebody's life, the positive impact. Another place, people we often get predominantly, focus on helping schools, or maybe we also are involved or were involved before COVID with old people's homes. Boys used to go and talk to those people and play music and bring them and organize teas for them at school and so on. But animal shelters is another place where there are usually lots of amazing opportunities for people who really love and care about animals, where you can go and work, particularly, during the summer when regular workers are on holiday and they need somebody to come and take the dogs out and play with them and so on. And I know an example that's not Harrow related, but somebody mentioned it to me about a girl who volunteered at a place like that. And then, like Jim said, she decided to take it to the next stage, and she thought, well, I really need to redesign their website. I need to take some really nice pictures of those homeless animals and maybe encourage people to take them to their homes. And that's what she did. And apparently the impact was just unbelievable, how suddenly lots more animals were taken from that shelter because of this new website, the beautiful pictures of the animals, properly, groomed and looking their best.
Yeah, and I think those are all fantastic points. And I think the thing that's really important to take away there is it can be very easy for students to think that because their school doesn't offer something, or because they've had to do stuff online, as was during the pandemic, that they can't do anything. But the students who really stand out, particularly in American applications, are the ones who go and find those opportunities themselves or look for extra opportunities. Now, I want to move on. The next two are very related: passion and commitment. This is something that these are two words that we always use when we're talking about extracurriculars, because it's no good just doing an extracurricular that you've just picked up and you do a little bit of. You really want to show the universities that you're passionate about it and committed to it, and that it actually means something to you. We've got a few more things to get through. So I wondered, Jim, if you wanted to just say just a little bit about those two things, and about how important it is to be committed to stuff.
Yeah, no, I think that's right. I think it goes back to what we were saying earlier about seeing something through. So if you're really passionate about something, wherever that's come from, whether that's personal reasons, family reasons, whatever, I think you're going to see it through. I think it's not something you're going to just do for a year, 6 months. So I think, students use those words, passion and commitment, quite freely, and we all do in recommendations and so on. But to actually demonstrate those, I think you need to show longevity over, that you've done something over a considerable period of time, you've given it quite a lot of hours. and that it's not something you're going to leave behind. So you might be leaving the UK to go to the US university, but you're going to retain a link to that activity. So you're going to take it from your UK school into the US. How you demonstrate passion and commitment. Yeah, I think it's all those things.
Yeah, I think what you said there about longevity and about, you know, putting lots of hours into it, but also I really like what you said about showing that you want to keep doing it.
Yeah,
so that it's something you want to keep doing when you're at university.
Yeah, yeah. It's something that you've thought about how it can transfer to where you're going, I think. I mean, the obvious one's sport, I suppose. You know, I'm passionate about hockey. This is something I want to do. I want to take forward. I want to make a difference on campus. I want to play. Yeah.
Yeah, I think those are really good points, and we can move on to the next slide and talking about how long is enough. And
yeah.
The next 2 points are quite related as well, and we often talk about these in terms of the essays that students write, but self-reflection, so being able to look at oneself and understand oneself, but also emotional intelligence, understanding other people. These are a bit harder to do through extracurriculars, but Kasia, do you have anything to say about these points? How do boys at Harrow show these sorts of qualities?
So I think with, when you work with, Harrow is a little bit of a bubble. It's one of very few remaining fully boarding schools. So all our students are boarders. They don't go home. We don't have flexi boarding. They don't go back home for weekends. They come and they stay with us throughout the term. The fact that they are involved with the local community, so they have to, leave that bubble, even if it's only for a few hours every week, and talk to people from really very different experience. I think it's a really good platform for developing that emotional intelligence and looking at things, through somebody else's eyes rather than only, in your way. Trips, sometimes, we run trips together. I know that there is, we have, or before COVID, we had those trips together with young offenders. And actually it was on a big boat, and they were together for, I can't remember whether it was 3 or 5 days, but in the sea, sailing together, and half of the crew were Harrow boys, half were those young offenders. So people of completely different, experience and opportunities and everything. And I think for boys it was a massive, eye-opener. They often don't realize that people like that really, exist, and they are often physically very close to where we are. We just don't really kind of mix with them because they are in that boarding environment. In the past, because of the subject I teach, I took boys to an orphanage in Kazakhstan, in Almaty. So of course, they could practice their language there, but they worked with children for either a week or a couple of weeks. And when you talk to our boys after, spending a week in an orphanage, you can really see how that week, changed them as human beings, how they look at things differently, how they appreciate things differently, and they can even see, they are themselves surprised by the impact, the power of it. I know it obviously takes a lot of time, so teachers generally tend to be busy, but organizing these opportunities, taking boys out of what is familiar and comfortable and cozy for them, I think it's probably the best way of developing that emotional intelligence when they have to mix with people that otherwise they probably would never really come across in their life.
That's brilliant and really good points there. And
I was going to say, Jason, that just going back to passion and commitment, I'd say, sorry, I should have mentioned this. I think setting something up yourself really shows passion and commitment. So just directing, I don't say just directing a play or starting. I was just looking earlier on about the list of clubs and societies at Uppingham, which is phenomenal. But the most interesting ones are not those that the teachers run. They're the ones that are run by students. The ones where students gone, do you know what? I'm obsessed and really want to know more about whatever it is, about nuclear physics, or whether it's there is no women's rugby at Uppingham. Therefore, I want to start women's rugby, and I think that demonstrates the passion and commitment when you've started something yourself.
Yeah.
More than anything, I think that would for me would really stand out on an application, be something I love writing about. And then on emotional intelligence and self-reflection, I think when one considers what you've got to write in your essays as the student, and your personal essays, the Common App essays, and so on, I think what you've really got to do is show the American underdog story, or the American story whereby you can show that you've learned from mistakes. You've been in a low place. You used to be an awful student of maths because you gave up, or you, thinking of co-curriculars, you really were failing at X, Y, and Z, whether it was sport or music or drama or within your peer group. But by doing X, Y, and Z, by changing, by listening to feedback, you did things differently. Yeah. And I think where it's really powerful, and I've read some really good pieces of student essays, and I've been able to write about it, certainly in the boarding school context, but it works in day schools, is when young people can show that they've helped other young people. So when our year 13s can show that they've mentored younger pupils through their own challenges. So reflecting on looking at your bullet point, self-reflection, emotional intelligence. So, I was that student who didn't go on with my peer group, so I did this, and helping that young person navigate that difficult journey. That shows leadership. It shows selfless sort of giving to the community, I think, as well. So just reflecting on how you weren't great and how you've moved on is and co-curriculars are brilliant for that.
No, fantastic points. Moving on, because I know that we've got a lot to talk about still. We might run out of time here, but I want to touch on intellectual curiosity, and just to explain, it's very important, of course, to be good at school and be able to show that, but American universities on the whole tend to want students to demonstrate a wide range of subjects that they're interested in. So students need to show that the sort of people who take an intellectual curiosity in things over and above what they do in school. Now, very briefly, Kasia, would you be able to say just a little bit about what Harrow students do to demonstrate interest in things outside of their A-levels?
Yes, so I think, as I mentioned, those essay prizes. For example, the John Locke Institute, I don't know if the listeners are familiar, but an amazing organization, and they run an annual essay prize. There is also, in this one, there is a junior category that younger students can enter. Amazing selection of topics, and also lots of them, like for younger boys. This year I know the topics for younger participants because my tutees this year are younger. Topics like, what does it mean to be equal? And seeing how students who are 13, 14, 15 years old, how they look at it. And some boys, I always tell them to connect that with their, passion. So I've got a boy who is maybe not an academic superstar, but really, really sporty and passionate about sport. And I said to him, because he was not very kind of keen to write that essay over his Easter break. And I said, what about if you look at what it means to be equal in sport? Now with all this, issues with transgender, with, what does it really mean, like on the scientific level, but also, if you look at disability and sport among disabled people. And he immediately, changed his attitude, and he thought, oh, actually, that sounds really interesting. Like the essay that first he thought was really boring, and like, what will I talk about, 2,000 words, what can I write about it? If they can link it to something that they are passionate about, it becomes a completely different story. So I would say, for demonstrating your intellectual curiosity, looking for those different essay prizes, and because of course you need to do some independent research, and that's another skill that's so valued by universities, somebody who actually wants to do a mini research of their own, account, go and find out more and write about it, and not only perhaps send the essay for the competition, but maybe go and present to a society or to your tutor group about the research you did, because then we have another set of skills about, public speaking and presenting, and discussion and leading a discussion. So it sometimes starts with one thing, and then by doing one essay, you suddenly, tick so many boxes on your application. Yeah. And I think that's very important. So those schools that don't have like a consolidated list of what's available, I would certainly encourage them to create one, and to have somebody who keeps an eye, and updates the whole thing. And it's not enough. Often schools have it, but having it, and half of the students don't even know it exists, and the other, probably 40%, they know it exists, but they couldn't care less. They are busy with, kicking the ball and doing other things.
I think some great advice there. I'm going to move things on, because I know that we're going to run out of time. So I'm going to just move on to the last few points here. And I think actually what you just touched on, Kasia, was this idea of linking the things you're doing to other bits of your profile. That theme in your profile is really important. So that idea of if you have an interest in sport, and doing something related to that, and that allows you to demonstrate all those qualities. And of course, talents.
Well, if I can just add one point. So linking things, only 2 days ago, I was talking to parents of another sporty boy. We've got lots of them at Harrow. And they were very concerned about the community service and how, and I exactly said, what about disabled athletes or disabled children who want to compete? There must be some opportunities. And within 2 days, the boy, with some help from the parents, identified 2 things that he will be doing over the summer, and combining his passion for sport and kind of, sharing it with disabled people who want to compete on a professional level.
Great example. And I just want to say one thing about the idea of spiky applications, or rather spiky cohorts at universities. Americans are very happy to talk about this all the time, because it's not that they want everyone to be exactly the same. They want people with different talents and different skills in different areas. So you don't have to all try and do everything that's listed here, and all try and do loads and loads of activities. It's about finding the things that you can really demonstrate your best qualities in, and really showing those off to the universities. But on that note, I want to move on to the last major slide. One very quick point, Jim. How do you get people to start thinking about these qualities early?
Well, I mean, yeah, I think if you start a co-curricular activity in year 12, it can look a little bit like it's been manufactured for a university application. So you've got to be a bit careful with that. I think what we're trying to do at Uppingham over a longer period, maybe 3 or 4 years, is get the students to understand that what they're about, get a bit of self-awareness, a bit of self-knowledge, a bit of coaching, and what they're passionate about. So really in tutorials with their tutor, getting them to start thinking about a unique selling point, perhaps in year 10, year 11, what is their thing that they want to use to make them stand out. That can change over time, of course, and one's got to be aware of that. But yeah, I think the earlier the better, because you can make a bit more of a difference from earlier.
I think it's very difficult, I think, sometimes to advise students who at that age might not know that they want to go to America. But what I always tell people, if we can catch them early enough, is it's no bad thing to start thinking about doing things outside of school and developing these skills, because they will be good for other things you do.
Absolutely.
Good for university in the UK, good for future careers, and good for your life to do extra things.
Yeah.
And just to add to that, I think these common questions come up. People ask, should I pause it while I'm doing exams? And I get a little bit worried when people say that, because I think, well, if you're having to pause it while things are tough at school, how can universities be sure that you'll be doing it later? And what if I stop? I guess it depends what it is. But Kasia, how do you keep students at Harrow going even when things are getting hard at school?
When they come to me and they complain about having too many, activities, commitments, I always tell the boys, but in a few years you will have 4 or maybe 5 children to feed. And how will you decide who gets food and who goes hungry? I said, how would you feel if, you have 2 siblings, if your parents decided to only feed or educate one because 3 is too much to cope? So that's what I always tell them. And they look at me and they're always a bit shocked, but those who know me well, they know my sense of humor. But no, I think that real commitment is when you take something, you keep going. You can't just take a holiday from helping somebody, or do it when you feel like doing it and when you don't have something better to occupy yourself with. That is, of course, not real commitment, and it's probably shows that sides of your character that you want to hide from the world rather than to show to university. So no, we try. Boys are really busy. I cannot tell you. Sometimes I'm really impressed with how they manage to cope with all that. And we always tell them when they come when they are 13 to our school, and we always tell them, if you don't have a hobby in the first term, we will find you 10. So, and with some housemasters, boys tell me that, if you're lazy with sport, then rather than doing something that you would, perhaps consider doing, even if you're not super passionate about, you end up doing some really rubbish sport, because if you don't pick up something, your housemaster will pick up 3 things that you don't like, and you will have to do it for the whole year. So that usually kind of motivate. They know that there is no such option as doing nothing. So either they will take care of it and they will build a good, balanced life here, or if not, then we will help them, and then they may end up, a bit miserable about their life.
Yeah, and I think the take-home message there is that you might think you're really busy and things are hard, but you've got to be able to demonstrate that you're going to be able to cope, especially if you want to go to a university. It's going to expect a lot of you academically.
I think, Jason, just really briefly, I think the danger at my school, I don't know if it's the same at other people's schools on this call, is year 11 can be the fallow year for both academic enrichment and co-curricular if one's not careful, because students get very caught up, understandably, in GCSE mocks. They need the correct grades to move on to the correct A levels they want to do, or the preferred A levels. So year 11 can just be, and things then blossom again in the lower 6, year 12, when suddenly it's a brave new world of sixth form and so on. But I think if you can get them through year 11, where they can do concurrently, academic work with some pressure alongside these hobbies, then you've done really well. because GCSE results seem to be the be-all and end-all at that point.
Exactly, good point. Now, very quickly on these last 2 points, I think people always ask, I've covered that last one already about how many should I do. It's not about doing tons and tons, it's about doing a few things well and looking for extra opportunities within the things that you're already doing. But how good you have to be, this is how long is a piece of string? My personal take is that universities are not expecting you to be the best at everything that you do, but they are looking for you to demonstrate those qualities within the things that you do. Of course, if you are the best at something, then that does show something off to the university. Is there anything you want to add? And I'm just going to limit you to 15 seconds. Anything you want to add to that at all?
I'd say it's, sorry, you go first.
No, I just wanted to say that I will need to leave the meeting because I've got parents already waiting.
Well, that's your 15 seconds.
To meet me, and these are parents waiting to talk about US universities and the tour of US universities this summer. So I unfortunately will need to go, if that's okay.
That's okay. Thank you very much for your time, Kasia. Jim and I will finish off with a summary. And,
I'll be,
and then answer any
Thank you very much. And if anybody has any questions, then please feel free to send them to Jason, and I will be delighted, to help if I can with some more ideas or advice. Thank you very much.
Thanks very much, Kasia.
Right, I'll be really brief. I think those are two quite difficult questions to answer, because when you look at the US, particularly in a holistic application, you could be the best violinist in the world, and that could be the only thing you could do. And one university might absolutely want that. As David Hawkins would always say, the university might be looking for the lead violinist that year, and their lead violinist might be leaving, and they're looking for that specific high level skill in the applicant. Or you could be good at 4 or 5 things to a much lower standard. So I think those two are quite hard questions. But as you said, Jason, I think application, commitment, and endeavor and tenacity are probably the things they're looking for more than diploma level flute or England rugby, or I think would be my impression, having done this for 6 years.
I completely agree. And just to summarize then, we'll take some questions in a moment, but on that exact point, more quality, not quantity. Obviously, if there are other things that you can do to a good level, then quantity is good, but it's about the quality of what you're doing. I always like to reiterate with people, do what you enjoy. You shouldn't be doing things you really don't like, but you should be able to find things within the things you're doing that you enjoy, and that helps with your passion and commitment. Think about your theme, as Kasia said early. Make sure the things you're doing are somewhat related to each other, so that you're able to tell that story more easily in your application. Of course, if you have talents, you must show them off, and demonstrate those qualities that the colleges want to see. Think about those qualities as you're going through your applications and thinking about what you're going to do. Just a few things for everyone before we start taking questions. If anyone wants to come to any other webinars, they're always on our website there, useducation.com/events. We've got another one coming up in a couple of weeks. For any teachers listening in, we do have our annual conference, which is on Monday. Jim, I'm not sure you've registered yet. You need to.
I haven't yet, but I quite like to come again. I've been to 2, I think.
It is in person again. So for teachers, we have our annual conference. You can find it on there. Advice and information on testing applications. We've got courses for SAT and ACT. So that subject test is a bit out of date. They don't exist anymore. Diagnostic tests for SAT and ACT, application support, all that sort of stuff. If you want to get in touch with us, there's our email address, info@useducation.com. You can go to our website. I'm going to leave that up there for a moment, just see if anyone's got any questions. Thanks for those of you who did put questions in earlier. Sarah, I can see you raised your hand. Sarah, if you want to shove your question in the Q&A box, we will answer it now. And if anyone else wants to, we've got a couple of minutes for questions. In the meantime, I will say thank you very much, Jim, and also thank you, abstention to Kasia. really interesting to hear what both your schools do.
I think for me, just really briefly, I know you've got a question, really briefly, would be, if I was reading this application, why on earth would I choose this applicant over the hundreds and hundreds of others? It's got to stand out, I think. So if you're at a school where everybody does X, Y, and Z co-curricular, and you're doing it quite well, that's great. But why is this applicant special? Why is this applicant different? I think that must be the magic formula, really. Why a unique selling point is?
Exactly. And I was talking about this earlier with some students about just how many applications admissions officers will have to read. You're applying to somewhere like UCLA, they get 150,000 applications a year, and each admissions officer is probably reading something like 1,000. So how do you stand out to them? It's not about having a very long list of extracurriculars, and indeed the Common App actually reduced the number of extracurriculars you could even list a little while ago, because people were just listing absolutely everything. So what they're really looking for, and what jumps out at them, is there a theme? Is there a real quick demonstration of these particular qualities that we're looking for? And do you look like an interesting person who can bring something to this campus? Of course, there's lots of other bits of the application form. There are the essays, the teacher references, and we will be doing and have done lots of webinars on those sorts of things as well. And if anyone does want to get in touch with us, please drop us an email there. If you go to our website, you can always book in a free call with me as well, just a quick chat. If anyone's got any questions for Jim, of course they can always pass them on to me, and I'll pass them on to you, Jim. I think there isn't a question, but there is a thank you, and thank you for the thank you. I think we'll end it there. But Jim, thank you very much for.
Thank you.
Thank you. Take care, everyone. Bye-bye.
Good luck, everybody. Thank you.